Hello everyone, this is Julia. Welcome back to my channel, or just welcome if you're new here. In today's video, we are doing a speed build and we are building this little micro home in Coppedale on a 20 by 15 lot. This build doesn't have an actual bedroom. It has this sort of like a studio floor plan, if that's something you can say. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it has everything in the same space. The kitchen, the living room, and the bedroom are all just one room, and then there is obviously the bathroom. The color scheme of this build turned out to be very neutral for the exterior. I went with a lot of these very warm browns and orange tones, and I really like how they look here together. But then for the interior, I wanted to add a little bit more color, so I used some blue and orange and yellow, as well as those more neutral tones. I gotta admit that while I was building this, I sort of had no idea of what I actually wanted to do. So I simply went in thinking that I want to build a micro home. And that was my only idea for this build, but I ended up with this house shape that I had actually planned for a much bigger home, but I feel like it really suits this little micro home, so I'm very glad that I ended up doing so. I wanted to add a little bit more space for this build since it is a micro home and there is a very limited amount of tiles that you can use. So I ended up doing this kind of like an outdoor patio area, and I wanted to add a pool in there, and I feel like it makes this build so much more interesting than it would have been without it. One of my favorite things about the exterior of this build is that chimney thing that I added. So it was actually a little bit funny because I ended up wasting 2 tiles simply to have that chimney, but I was not ready to compromise on that, okay? I really love how it looks, and it felt like a major thing for me to have it in this build. And well, there is actually no fireplace inside the house, so it is purely decorational. There is no actual use for it, but I wanted to have it, so I put it there. And it's okay, sometimes you can do stuff like that. That actually felt kind of like an ongoing theme while I was building this, so I just kept doing things that probably don't make a lot of sense, but I just felt like they looked nice. For an example, I added they're some kind of grass patch from Island Living, and I was thinking, are these too tropical for the build? And I was like, probably, but we're gonna do it anyway because it looks cute, so who cares? Also, something that I ended up doing with this build was that I used a little bit different looking items, and that also meant that I did use a lot of different packs in here, so this is definitely not a limited pack build. However, I do want to mention that I did use a lot of objects from Tiny Living, which is pretty much given since this is a micro home, so often if I make very small houses, I do feel like Tiny Living comes in so handy because the objects were obviously created for the purpose of making very, very small homes. By the way, I really can't remember when was the last time that I actually made a micro home. I make a lot of tiny houses, but then for some reason micro homes just feel a little bit too intimidating for me, and I just end up not doing them. It's like I might start doing a micro home, but then I'm like, let's make it a tiny home instead, because I feel like there's so much more to play around with tiny homes, and then micro homes they're so small, you can't really fit anything in there. You always need to compromise on so many things. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the interior of this build. So I ended up going with this a little bit more colorful color scheme, like I mentioned, and I really think it works for the interior, but I did end up including some of those neutral tones that I used for the exterior, which makes the entire build look very cohesive in my opinion. The floor plan is obviously very simple because the house is actually so small that you can't really do a complicated floor plan with it. However, I really enjoyed the fact that I managed to kind of separate the entrance from the rest of the house with like one wall piece, and that also gave me a little bit more space for the kitchen. And that was one of my favorite things that I ended up doing for the interior. Something that I feel like is worth mentioning in here is that I had to change a couple of things off cam because this build wasn't entirely functional. So the main thing that I can mention is that the divider that you can see here, I needed to change that for a pretty plain one, and I was so sad about it because I think that divider looks super cute here. I really love the little details on it, but it wasn't functional for some reason. That divider takes up a lot of space and my sim couldn't get to the bed. So yeah, I'm really sorry I had to change that, but you can see everything that I changed in the screenshots. So yeah, I'm sad about it, but you know, it's fine. It still looks good, but it wasn't exactly how I wanted it to be. Also, even though the dining table has 2 chairs, only one sim can eat there at a time because, well, the other spot kind of has a laptop, since I sort of designed it to be like a replacement for a desk. Also, even though I did mention that I don't make a lot of microhomes, I gotta mention that this was so fun to make that I might have changed my mind a little bit about microhomes. I didn't find it as hard as I was expecting it to be, so I might make more microhomes in the future, you know? I'm not really like actually sure about that, but it's definitely a possibility. I'm kind of inspired to make more of these. The bathroom turned out a lot better than I was anticipating it to. I kind of expected it to be really bad because I was definitely not in the mood to make a bathroom, but I was kind of surprised because I feel like it turned out pretty cute in the end. But anyway, we are almost at the end of this video, so I really hope that you have enjoyed this, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, and also remember to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!